I am Dr. Laura Moreno, and in this video, I want to talk to you about rosemary tea, a herbal infusion that many people drink regularly without fully understanding what it actually does in the body, how to take it correctly, and who should avoid it. Rosemary tea is often promoted as something harmless and universally beneficial, but the truth is more nuanced. Like any plant with active compounds, it has real effects, real benefits, and real situations where it is not a good idea. Rosemary is a very aromatic and potent herb. Its smell alone already tells you that it stimulates the nervous system. That stimulation can be helpful in certain contexts, but it also explains why rosemary tea is not suitable for everyone or for every moment of the day. One of the real benefits of rosemary tea is its effect on digestion. Some people notice that when they drink it after a meal, they feel less bloated, less heavy, and more comfortable. Rosemary can stimulate digestive juices and help with slow digestion. This can be useful if you tend to feel sluggish after eating, especially after heavier meals. However, this benefit depends a lot on the condition of your stomach. Rosemary tea works better when digestion is slow, not when the stomach is irritated. If you already deal with gastritis, acid reflux, or stomach pain, rosemary tea can actually make symptoms worse instead of better. Another benefit that many people report is improved mental clarity. Rosemary tea can make some people feel more alert, more focused, and less mentally foggy. This happens because rosemary has a mild stimulating effect on the nervous system and circulation. It is not a sedative plant. It does not calm the brain. It gently activates it. Because of this, rosemary tea is usually better suited for the morning or early afternoon. Drinking it late in the day can interfere with sleep, especially if you are sensitive to stimulation or already have trouble falling asleep. Some people also notice benefits related to circulation. They may feel warmer, have less heaviness in their legs, or feel more energized. This is usually subtle, not dramatic, but noticeable if your circulation tends to be slow or if you feel cold easily. Rosemary tea is also often used to support liver function and general metabolic activity. Again, this does not mean it detoxes the body. Your liver already does that. What rosemary can do in some people is gently support digestive and metabolic processes, but it does not clean the body, and it should never be used as a replacement for healthy habits. Now let's talk about how to drink rosemary tea correctly, because this is where many people make mistakes. First, the dose matters. Rosemary tea should never be very strong. Using too much rosemary does not increase the benefits and can easily cause side effects. A safe and reasonable amount is about 1 teaspoon of dried rosemary leaves per cup of hot water. That is enough. If you are using fresh rosemary, a small sprig is sufficient. More than that is unnecessary. The water should be hot, but not aggressively boiling over the leaves for a long time. Pour hot water over the rosemary and let it steep for about 5 to 7 minutes, not longer. A longer steep makes the tea much stronger and more irritating. 1 cup per day is usually enough. This is not a tea you should drink several times a day. Drinking it occasionally or for short periods is much more appropriate than making it a daily permanent habit. The timing also matters. Rosemary tea is best taken in the morning or early afternoon, preferably after meals if you are using it for digestion. Drinking it on an empty stomach can be irritating for some people. Now let's talk about who should not drink rosemary tea, because this part is often ignored. If you have gastritis, stomach ulcers, frequent heartburn, or acid reflux, rosemary tea is generally not a good idea. Its stimulating and aromatic compounds can irritate the stomach lining and worsen symptoms. If you have trouble sleeping, anxiety, or feel easily overstimulated, rosemary tea may not be suitable for you, especially later in the day. Even small amounts can increase restlessness in sensitive individuals. Pregnant women should avoid drinking rosemary tea regularly. Rosemary can stimulate uterine activity, and while small culinary amounts are generally fine, concentrated tea is not recommended during pregnancy. People with high blood pressure should be cautious. While rosemary does not affect everyone the same way, its stimulating effect on circulation can raise blood pressure in some individuals. If you are taking medications that affect blood pressure, blood clotting, or the nervous system, rosemary tea may interact or amplify effects. In these cases, it should not be used casually. Another group that should be careful is people with seizure disorders, because rosemary contains compounds that can increase nervous system excitability. Children should not drink rosemary tea regularly. Their nervous systems are more sensitive, and this is not a calming herb. Now let's address a common misunderstanding. Rosemary tea is not a detox tea, not a weight loss solution, and not something you should drink every day just because it's natural. Natural does not mean neutral. It means active. Some people feel amazing with rosemary tea. Others feel jittery, irritated, or uncomfortable. Both responses are valid. The body is always right. If after drinking rosemary tea you feel heartburn, nervousness, headache, or difficulty sleeping, that is your body telling you this plant is not right for you, at least not in that form. Using rosemary tea responsibly means respecting its strength, using small amounts, paying attention to timing, and knowing when to avoid it completely. Rosemary is a powerful plant. When used correctly, it can support digestion, mental clarity, and circulation. When misused, it can disrupt sleep, irritate the stomach, and overstimulate the nervous system. The key is not whether rosemary tea is good or bad, but whether it is appropriate for you, your body, your health situation, and the moment you are in right now. And to understand whether it is appropriate for you, it helps to pay attention to how your body responds, not just in the moment, but also hours later. Some effects of rosemary tea are subtle at first and become clearer with time. For example, you might feel fine right after drinking it, but notice later that you feel more restless, slightly anxious, or have trouble falling asleep that night. That delayed response is important information. Another point that often gets overlooked is consistency. Some people try rosemary tea once, feel nothing, and decide it doesn't work. Others drink it daily for weeks and then start experiencing side effects without connecting them to the tea. Rosemary is not meant to be used continuously. It works best when used occasionally or in short periods, not as a permanent daily drink. It's also important to understand that rosemary tea affects people differently depending on their baseline state. If your energy levels are already high and your nervous system is easily stimulated, rosemary tea can push you into overstimulation. If, on the other hand, you tend to feel sluggish, mentally foggy, or low in energy, a small amount may feel helpful. This is why copying someone else's routine is rarely a good idea. What works well for one person can feel completely wrong for another. The goal is not to force a benefit, but to observe whether one appears naturally. Another real benefit some people notice is a mild effect on headaches related to tension or poor circulation. Rosemary tea can help in those specific cases, but it is not a general headache remedy. If headaches are frequent or severe, relying on herbal teas instead of addressing the underlying cause can delay proper care. There is also a lot of confusion about rosemary tea and memory. Some people associate rosemary with memory support. While certain components of rosemary may support mental alertness, this does not mean drinking the tea will prevent memory problems or cognitive decline. It may help you feel more awake and focused in the short term, but it is not a treatment or a long-term solution. The same applies to hormonal balance. Rosemary tea is sometimes promoted online for hormonal regulation, especially in women. The reality is that rosemary can have mild effects on circulation and metabolism, but it is not a hormone-balancing herb. Using it for that purpose without guidance can create more imbalance, not less. Now let's talk about preparation mistakes that reduce benefits or increase side effects. One common mistake is boiling rosemary for a long time instead of steeping it. This makes the tea much more concentrated and harsh. Another mistake is using essential oil instead of the leaves. Rosemary essential oil should never be ingested unless under professional guidance. It is extremely concentrated and can be dangerous. Some people also mix rosemary with other stimulating herbs, thinking it will enhance the effect. This often backfires, leading to palpitations, anxiety, or digestive discomfort. Sweetening rosemary tea heavily with sugar or honey can also change how it affects your body, especially if you are sensitive to blood sugar fluctuations. It's also worth mentioning that the quality of the rosemary matters. Old, improperly stored, or contaminated herbs can cause digestive upset. fresh or well-dried rosemary from a reliable source is always preferable. Now let's return to who should definitely avoid rosemary tea. If you are pregnant or trying to become pregnant, it is better to avoid rosemary tea altogether. Culinary use in small amounts is generally fine, but concentrated tea is not recommended. If you have chronic anxiety, panic symptoms, or sleep disorders, rosemary tea may worsen these issues rather than help. If you have a history of seizures or neurological sensitivity, rosemary tea should be avoided. If you have uncontrolled high blood pressure or heart rhythm issues, rosemary tea may not be safe. And if you are taking medications that stimulate the nervous system, thin the blood, or affect blood pressure, rosemary tea should not be used casually. One more important point. Rosemary tea is not meant to fix lifestyle imbalances. If you are chronically exhausted, stressed, underslept, or eating irregularly, no herbal tea will compensate for that. At best, it will mask symptoms temporarily. Herbal remedies work best when they support a balanced system, not when they are used to override the body's signals. Listening to your body is more important than following trends. If rosemary tea makes you feel better in a clear, calm way and you use it responsibly, it can be a useful tool. If it makes you feel worse, that is not failure, it is information. There is no universal herb that works for everyone. The body is individual, dynamic, and constantly responding to context. Using rosemary tea with awareness means choosing the right moment, the right amount, and knowing when to stop. And that awareness is what makes the difference between a helpful habit and a harmful one. Because in the end, the most important benefit you can get from any herbal remedy is not what it does chemically, but what it teaches you about your own body, its responses, its limits, and the signals it sends when something supports balance and when something disrupts it. And that awareness becomes even more important when people start using rosemary tea with a specific goal in mind, like increasing energy, improving digestion, or feeling more mentally sharp. Goals are fine, but the body doesn't always respond in a linear way. Sometimes what seems like a good idea on paper creates tension internally, and the only way to know is by paying attention to subtle signals. For example, some people drink rosemary tea in the morning, hoping it will replace coffee. For a small group, that works reasonably well. For others, it creates a wired but tired feeling. The mind feels alert, but the body feels tense. That mismatch is a sign that the nervous system is being pushed rather than supported. Another situation where rosemary tea is often misunderstood is stress. People sometimes assume that because it's an herbal tea, it must be calming. Rosemary is not a calming herb, it is activating. If your stress comes from mental overload, pressure, or anxiety, rosemary tea may intensify that state instead of relieving it. This is why timing matters so much. Drinking rosemary tea on a day when you already feel overstimulated can amplify discomfort. Drinking it on a day when you feel sluggish and mentally dull may feel supportive. Same tea, different context, very different result. There's also the question of duration. Even when rosemary tea feels helpful, that doesn't mean it should be used indefinitely. The body benefits from variation. Using the same stimulating plant every day can reduce its effectiveness and increase the likelihood of side effects over time. A good rule is to use rosemary tea for short periods, then take breaks. This gives the nervous system a chance to recalibrate and prevents dependence on external stimulation. Another overlooked factor is hydration. Rosemary tea has a mild diuretic effect in some people. If you're already dehydrated, drinking it without adequate water intake can lead to headaches, fatigue, or dizziness. That's not because the tea is bad, but because the context isn't right. It's also important to understand that rosemary tea is not neutral for the digestive tract. While it can help with slow digestion, it can worsen irritation. People sometimes confuse stimulating digestion with healing the stomach. These are not the same thing. If your digestive symptoms include burning, pain, or sensitivity, rosemary tea may aggravate them. In those cases, gentler herbs or simply removing irritants may be more appropriate. Another area where confusion appears is blood sugar. Some people read that rosemary may influence glucose metabolism and assume it's helpful for everyone. In reality, any effect is mild and inconsistent. Relying on rosemary tea to manage blood sugar can create a false sense of control and delay more effective strategies. The same applies to inflammation. Rosemary contains compounds that may have anti-inflammatory properties, but drinking the tea is not the same as treating inflammation in the body. Chronic inflammation requires a much broader approach. There's also the psychological aspect. When people label a tea as healthy, they may ignore negative signals because they believe it must be good for them. This disconnect between belief and experience is one of the most common reasons herbal remedies cause problems. Your body's response always matters more than general claims. Another point worth mentioning is that rosemary tea can interact with fasting. Some people drink it during intermittent fasting periods. For some, this feels fine. For others, it triggers stomach irritation or nervousness. Again, context determines the effect. The body is not a machine that responds the same way every time. Hormones, stress levels, sleep quality, and even emotional state can change how rosemary tea affects you on a given day. That's why flexibility is so important. If rosemary tea feels good one week and not the next, that doesn't mean something is wrong. It means your needs have changed. Using herbal teas wisely means checking in with your body regularly, not locking yourself into rigid routines. Another common mistake is combining rosemary tea with supplements that already stimulate the nervous system. This stacking effect can push the body into overstimulation without realizing it. More is not better. Stronger is not better. Better is better. Rosemary tea can be a useful tool when used with intention and restraint. It can support digestion, alertness, and circulation for the right person at the right time. But it should never override discomfort, sleep problems, or persistent symptoms. If something feels off, the correct response is not to push through, but to pause. The goal of using any herbal tea is not to force the body into a certain state, but to support balance. And balance often requires knowing when not to use something, even if it's popular or widely praised. Rosemary tea is a good example of how natural does not mean universally safe or appropriate. It has personality, it has direction, and it needs to match yours. When you stop asking, "Is rosemary tea good?" and start asking, "Is rosemary tea right for me right now?" your relationship with herbal remedies becomes much healthier, more respectful, and far more effective. And that shift in perspective opens the door to using plants as allies rather than fixes, allowing your body to guide the process and helping you make choices that support your well-being in a way that feels sustainable, calm, and aligned with what your system actually needs in this moment. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming videos where we talk about health in a clear, honest, and practical way. Share this video with someone who might find it helpful, leave your questions or experiences in the comments, and join me as we continue learning how to listen to the body and make more informed decisions for long-term well-being.